One of these gods didn't die in battle. He didn't lose a fight. He got swallowed, alive, and he saw it coming for centuries and still couldn't stop it. That's later. First, you need to see how it all started, with the god everyone swore to protect. The Norse gods were never promised forever.
Every one of them knew the exact shape of their own death before it happened. A prophecy called Ragnarok, written in fire and blood centuries before it arrived. They saw it coming for lifetimes, planned for it, armed themselves against it, and every single one of them walked into it anyway. Today, we go through all 7. Their legends, their final days, the precise moment each of their hearts stopped.
Some of them died fighting monsters bigger than mountains. Some traded away their own safety for something they wanted more. One of them died from a single tiny thing nobody thought to guard against, and that death is the reason every other name on this list ends up dead at all. Balder was the god of light. Not merely respected, genuinely, universally loved by every living thing in the 9 realms. For a long time, he lived untouched by any of it. Then the dream started. Night after night, Balder saw his own death. His mother, Frigg, terrified, went to every single thing in existence, fire, iron, stone, disease, every beast, and made each of them swear an oath, never harm her son. Every one of them agreed, without hesitation, without exception. Balder became, as far as anyone in the 9 realms could tell, completely invincible. The gods even turned it into a party trick, hurling axes and spears and fire directly at his chest for entertainment. He'd stand there laughing, arms out, completely unharmed, no matter how sharp the blade or how heavy the axe. The single safest being in the entire cosmos. But someone was watching who hated that safety. A trickster searched every realm for the one thing Frigg had overlooked, and found it. Mistletoe.
Too small, too harmless to ever have been asked for an oath. He carved it into a dart, small enough to hide in a closed fist, sharp enough to do exactly what a plant should never be able to do. Then he walked it over to Hoder, Balder's blind brother, standing apart from the game because he couldn't see well enough to throw with the others. The trickster placed the dart in his hand, guided his arm, pointed it at Balder, and let go. The dart flew, expecting the usual laughter. Instead, silence. The mistletoe punched straight through Balder's chest and killed the god of light instantly. That was the first domino. And the trickster who set it up? He does not get away with it. His punishment is coming, and by the time you see it, you'll wish it had come sooner. Balder's death was the crack in the foundation. Everything after this is the building coming down. If you want the real death behind every name history made famous, subscribe. New one every 2 days. Long before the final battle, there was Tyr, the original god of war, but not of slaughter. While other gods chased glory, Tyr guarded something quieter and harder to keep. Honor, oaths, agreements held even between enemies who hated each other. And in the Norse world, honor always comes with a bill attached, sooner or later. The gods had a growing problem named Fenrir. A wolf prophesied to one day devour the king of the gods himself. He was still young, but he was getting bigger, hungrier, more dangerous by the day, growing faster than anyone expected, and the gods decided he had to be chained before it was too late. But Fenrir wasn't stupid. He eyed the chains with suspicion and refused to be bound unless one god proved good faith by placing a hand directly inside his jaws. If the chains were a trap, the wolf would bite it off. Every god in the room froze. None of them wanted to be the one to pay that price. Tyr stepped forward anyway. He already knew the chains were a trap. He knew they'd hold, and he knew precisely what the wolf would do the moment he realized he'd been caught. He placed his hand inside Fenrir's mouth regardless. The instant the chains locked, the jaws snapped shut, and Tyr's hand was gone in a single motion. His flesh traded for a delay against a fate none of them could actually stop. Remember that wolf.
He's the reason the king of the gods doesn't survive this video. When Ragnarok came, Tyr marched onto the battlefield one-handed, and instead of facing the wolf that had taken his limb, he found a different monster waiting. Garm, the hellhound of the underworld. So how does the god who already gave up his hand for justice finally settle the last debt? Tyr and Garm collided in a storm of teeth and iron, and at the exact same moment, they each delivered the blow that finished the other.
He died on the battlefield, the price of honor finally, fully paid. Freyr wasn't built for war. He was the god of sunshine, rain, and growing things, the very idea of life itself made into a god. He wasn't supposed to need a weapon at all. And yet he owned one of the most terrifying weapons in the cosmos, a sword that fought entirely on its own, cutting down enemies without Freyr ever lifting it.
With that sword in hand, nothing in the 9 realms could touch him. But Freyr's downfall didn't start with an enemy, a battle, or a betrayal. It started with a glance. He looked across the realms one day and saw the giantess Gerd, and fell so hard, so fast, that he made himself sick with longing, unable to eat or sleep or think about anything else. Desperate, he sent his servant to bring her to him.
Her hand came with a price he didn't expect. The servant demanded the self-fighting sword as payment. Freyr knew exactly what he was giving up. He handed it over anyway, choosing one moment of the heart over decades of protection. For years, nothing happened. The bill just waited. When Ragnarok arrived, the sky tore open, and the fire giant Surt marched out carrying a blade built to end gods.
Freyr walked onto the battlefield to defend everything he'd ever grown, and realized too late exactly what he'd traded away. He had nothing but a stag's antler snatched up in desperation. So how does a god of peace survive the end of the world armed with a piece of bone? He doesn't. Surt cut him down, the final cost of a trade he made for love, years before he ever needed the weapon he'd given away. 3 down.
And the wolf that took Tyr's hand hasn't even had his worst day yet. Heimdall stood at the edge of the world for his entire existence, guarding Bifrost, the burning rainbow bridge between realms. He never slept, not once in the entire history of the cosmos. He could see for hundreds of miles through total darkness and hear grass growing out of the dirt. Nothing got past him. That was the whole point of him. But there was one thing he watched more closely than anything else. Loki. Loki was never like the other gods, a giant by blood, adopted into Asgard, bound to Odin as a brother by an oath neither of them fully trusted. When the gods hit a wall no honorable god could climb, they called Loki, because he'd do the thing they wouldn't. And he always solved it. But never for free. Remember Balder, the god everyone swore to protect? The one who died from a dart nobody saw coming? Loki built that dart. He put it in a blind god's hand and pointed the arm himself. This time, the gods didn't forgive him. There would be no clever escape, no last-second trick to talk his way free. They hunted him down without mercy, dragged him underground into the dark, and bound him to a rock, using the entrails of his own son as chains no blade could cut, no strength could break. Above his face they hung a serpent that dripped burning venom onto his skin without pause for centuries, while his hatred compounded instead of cooling. When Ragnarok finally cracked the world open, his chains snapped with it. Loki led an army of monsters straight at the gates of Asgard. Waiting for him was Heimdall, the watchman who'd spent an eternity cataloguing every one of his lies, and who raised the horn that warned every god the end had finally come. So how does the trickster who talked his way out of everything, and the watchman who never once looked away, finally end this? There was no trick left to play.
Heimdall and Loki matched each other blow for blow in a straight, brutal fight, until both of them drove a blade into the other's chest at the exact same moment. 2 of the oldest enemies in the cosmos, gone in the same breath. Baldur's killer is dead. That promise is paid in full. There's only one debt left on this list, and it belongs to the wolf. Odin was the ruler of Asgard.
But more than a king, he was a seeker of knowledge, obsessed with the future most gods refused to look at. He tore out one of his own eyes and dropped it into Mimir's well, just for a single glimpse of what was coming, a price most gods wouldn't even consider.
He hung himself from the world tree for 9 days and 9 nights, starving, bleeding, pierced by his own spear, refusing help, refusing food, until the secrets of the runes finally surrendered to him.
He gathered the greatest fallen warriors of humanity into Valhalla, building an army out of the dead for a war that hadn't even started yet, training them every single day, drilling them relentlessly, for a fight only he seemed certain was actually coming. He did all of it because he already knew how the story ended. Odin knew that wolf, the one whose jaws took Tyr's hand, was growing, waiting, prophesied to do one specific thing: devour the All-Father himself. He knew that no rune, no army, no eye traded away could change what was coming, no matter how much wisdom he bought with his own suffering. And still, he prepared for a battle he already knew he was destined to lose, because doing nothing was never an option he could live with.
When Ragnarok finally arrived, the prophecy kept its appointment. Fenrir broke free, a wolf so massive his lower jaw dragged the earth while his upper jaw scraped the sky. Odin rode out to meet him on his 8-legged horse, spear in hand, the wisdom of the ages behind every strike.
So how does the wisest being in the universe, the one who saw this exact moment coming for centuries, the one this entire video has been building toward, actually go? Fenrir's jaws opened wide enough to swallow a king. And they did. Odin disappeared into the wolf's throat, gone, leaving his son Vidar to avenge him in the wreckage of the world he'd spent a lifetime preparing for. The All-Father is gone. Nobody on this list dies bigger than that.
But there's still one god left, and his death might be the most brutal irony of all 7, because he wins his fight first. When negotiation failed and strategy collapsed, the gods called Thor. He was Asgard's blunt instrument, the protector who solved problems by hitting them until they stopped being problems. No riddles, no bargains, no clever traps. Just a hammer, a target, and the confidence of a god who had never once lost a fight he actually finished. He carried Mjolnir, a hammer that never missed and always returned to his hand. But Thor had one enemy his hammer alone couldn't guarantee against: Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, a creature so enormous its body wrapped entirely around the world, biting its own tail to hold itself together.
At Ragnarok, years of rivalry became the main event. The ocean itself boiled as the serpent rose from the deep, spraying black venom into the air until the sky itself turned toxic, poisoning the wind for miles in every direction. Thor walked straight into the poison to finish it. The fight shattered the ground beneath them, and then, with one final blow, Thor crushed the serpent's skull. It collapsed, lifeless, into the sea. Thor had won. He'd killed the one beast that had terrified even gods. So how does the strongest being in the universe die right after his greatest victory? He turned to walk away. He made it 9 steps through the cloud of poison the serpent had breathed out with its last breath. On the 10th, his legs gave out beneath him, and the god of thunder collapsed onto the earth he'd just saved, dead. The only one on this list to win his fight and lose his life in the same minute. 7 gods, 7 endings, all written long before any of them chose them. All part of a prophecy none of them could rewrite, no matter how hard they fought against it. Balder, killed by the one thing his mother forgot to ask. Tyr, paying honour's price with his own hand. Freyr, undone by a trade made for love. Heimdall and Loki, closing an eternity of hatred in the same breath. Odin swallowed whole by the exact fate he spent centuries trying to outplan. And Thor, who beat the monster and still didn't make it home. From the ashes of everything you just watched burn, a new world rose. Green, fertile, clean. And Balder, the god who died before any of this ever began, walked out of the underworld to see it. The story of the Norse gods was never a story about winning. Every single one of them lost in the end.
It's a story about knowing exactly how your ending is coming, years or centuries in advance, and walking toward it anyway.